All right, let's talk about one of the biggest, most influential, and honestly, most controversial books ever written, Plato's Republic. Now, this thing is basically a blueprint for the perfect society. But the tricky part is, one person's idea of a perfect world can be someone else's absolute nightmare. And we're going to see exactly why.
So where does this whole massive conversation even begin? Well, it all gets kicked off with this really cynical challenge from a guy named Thrasymachus. He basically walks in and says, you want to know what justice is? It's just a word the powerful use to get what they want. Might makes right. He's saying that the people in charge make the laws to benefit themselves, and they call it justice to get everyone else to fall in line.
And that is the big question that Plato, speaking through his mentor Socrates, is determined to answer. See, Socrates isn't buying it. He's not happy with the idea that we're only good because we want a good reputation or because we're scared of getting in trouble. No, he wants to prove something much deeper, that being a just person is good for its own sake, that it actually makes you a better, healthier, more whole human being, whether anyone's watching or not.
So that's a huge question, right? How do you even start to tackle that? Well, Socrates comes up with this really clever approach, a kind of thought experiment.
His logic is actually pretty simple. He says, look, trying to find justice in a single person is like trying to read tiny letters from far away. It's tough. But what if we build an entire city that's perfectly just? Then justice will be written in huge letters, big enough for everyone to see. Once we figure that out, we can just shrink it back down and see how it applies to you and me, to the individual.
And this city he imagines, he calls it Kallipolis, which literally means the beautiful city. And the whole thing, the entire society, is built on one single, really powerful rule.
And here it is, the principle of specialization. Basically, everyone has to do the one thing they're naturally best at. And that's it. No side hustles, no being a jack of all trades. If you're born to be a carpenter, you're a carpenter, full stop. If you're meant to be a soldier, that's your whole life. The idea is that this creates this super efficient, perfectly harmonious society where everything just works, kind of like a well-oiled machine.
So this leads to a really rigid social structure, broken down into 3 classes. At the very top, you've got the rulers, the so-called philosopher kings. Their whole deal is wisdom. Then you have the auxiliaries. These are the soldiers, the protectors, and their defining virtue is courage. And holding it all up, the foundation of the city, are the producers, the farmers, the artisans, everyone who makes stuff. Their virtue is moderation.
Okay, but how do you get an entire city to just accept this, to agree that this is their place in life? Well, the rulers use what Plato calls a noble lie. It's this big foundational myth they tell everyone. The story goes that all citizens are brothers and sisters, born from the earth itself. But the gods mixed different metals into their souls when they were made. Gold for the rulers, silver for the soldiers, and bronze or iron for everyone else. It basically says your destiny, your class, is baked into you from birth. Okay, so remember, this whole city-building exercise wasn't just for fun. The whole point was to understand justice in a single person. So now, let's take this 3-part city and see how it maps onto the human soul. Plato's big idea here is that our soul is like a miniature version of the city. It's got 3 parts too. First, there's reason. That's the logical, calculating part of you. It's your inner ruler. Then there's spirit. This is your ambition, your sense of honor, your fight. That's your inner auxiliary, or soldier. And finally, there's appetite. This is all your desires, for food, for money, that's the producer class inside you. So here's the big reveal. For Plato, justice isn't about obeying laws or what other people tell you to do. It's all internal. It's about having a healthy, balanced soul. A just person is someone whose reason is in the driver's seat, using its spirit to keep all those appetites in check. Injustice, on the other hand, is basically a civil war inside your head where your desires are running the show.
But this brings up a huge question, right? If your reason is supposed to be in charge, what's it supposed to be aiming for? How does it know what's actually good? And this question sends us spiraling into the most famous, and maybe the weirdest, part of all of Plato's philosophy.
To explain this, Plato doesn't just give a straight answer. Instead, he uses these incredible metaphors, starting with his core idea about what reality even is. Okay, stick with me here. He calls it the theory of forms. The idea is that the physical world we see and touch isn't the real world. Nope. True reality is in this other realm, an eternal, unchanging place filled with perfect concepts he calls forms. Think about it like this. We see a bunch of different chairs, right?
None of them are perfect, but they all participate in the perfect idea of chairness. That perfect idea is the form, and for Plato, there's a form for everything: justice, beauty, and the ultimate one, the form of the good.
He even drew a map for this journey of the mind, called the divided line. You can think of it like a ladder. Down at the bottom rungs, you're just dealing with shadows and illusions. You climb up a bit, and now you're dealing with actual physical things. But that's still not real knowledge. To get to true understanding, you have to climb all the way to the top, into this world of pure thought, where you can finally grasp the forms themselves. And shining on all of it is the form of the good, like a sun in this world of ideas.
And to make this journey crystal clear, Plato tells his most famous story of all, the Allegory of the Cave. So, picture this. There are these prisoners, chained up in a dark cave since birth. They can't move their heads, they can only stare at the wall in front of them. Behind them, there's a fire, and people are walking back and forth holding up puppets. All the prisoners ever see are the shadows these puppets cast on the wall, and the only sounds they hear are echoes.
Now for these prisoners, those shadows aren't just shadows. That is their reality. It's the only reality they've ever known. They have no idea there are real objects making the shadows or that there's a whole world outside. They'd probably even have games, guessing which shadow will appear next, and whoever's best at it is considered a genius. And here's the kicker. Plato says that's us. Most of us are those prisoners, just staring at shadows. So what happens if one of these prisoners is suddenly set free and forced to turn around? Well, it's not a happy experience at first. The fire itself would be painfully bright. And imagine being dragged up a steep, rocky path out of the only home you've ever known. You'd be confused, you'd be angry, you'd probably fight to go back to the familiar darkness. Once outside, the sun, which represents the form of the good, is absolutely blinding. But slowly, his eyes adjust and he starts to see things as they truly are. He sees the real world. This freed prisoner, of course, is the philosopher. And now that they've seen the truth, Plato says they have a responsibility. They have to go back down into the darkness, back into the cave, to try and lead the others out, even if the other prisoners think he's crazy and want to kill him for ruining their shadow game. So, there you have it, Plato's grand solution. A city ruled by these enlightened philosophers who have literally seen the truth. It sounds pretty good, right? But what would it actually be like to live in this perfect city? Yeah, this is where things get uncomfortable. To keep the city perfectly stable and unified, Plato suggests some pretty extreme stuff. We're talking strict censorship of all art, music, and stories. The ruling classes, they don't get to have traditional families. Kids are taken at birth and raised by the state, so they don't know who their parents are. Rulers can't own private property or money. And maybe most shocking of all, the state controls who has babies with whom, using a rigged lottery system. It's literally a program of eugenics. Now, why would he propose all this? In his mind, things like family and private wealth are what lead to corruption, jealousy, and division. He wants to eliminate all of it. For Plato, the good of the whole city, the community, is way, way more important than what any single person wants. So in this perfect society, your personal happiness isn't really the goal. The goal is the happiness of the state as a whole. And that's the massive, challenging question the Republic just leaves sitting there for us to deal with. It's a perfect city, sure, but it's orderly because it's completely unfree. So which one matters more, social harmony or individual liberty? What are you willing to give up for a perfect society? It's a question that's just as powerful and just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. Thanks for joining this explainer.